Years later, I still think about that unsettling find at the old cemetery. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 35. I'd always had a fascination with hidden parts of town. I loved to explore local lore and forgotten histories. When I found the cemetery at the edge of the city, I was drawn to it. The place had an eerie charm, with overgrown trees and neglected graves. Some tombstones were beautiful, but most were crumbling into the earth. I visited the cemetery a few times, wanting to learn its secrets. It felt peaceful, yet unsettling. I brushed off my unease while I snapped photos under the gray sky. As I wandered the rows of graves, an unshakable sensation crept over me. I tried to ignore it. That day, as the light began to fade, I stumbled onto a dilapidated mausoleum. The door hung askew, and the air inside felt heavy. I crouched down beside the old stone, tracing my fingers over its surface. That's when I noticed something. A loose stone in the foundation caught my eye. I pulled it out, and when I looked inside, my heart raced. There lay a small, weathered journal. It felt cold as I picked it up, excitement mixed with dread. Flipping through the pages, I saw unsettling drawings mixed with frantic writings. The journal spoke of a family that had lived there long ago. They faced tragedy and despair. I didn't know why, but I felt I had to take it home. That night, shadows around my apartment seemed to flicker strangely. I brushed it off as paranoia. I left the journal on my desk, hoping to forget about it. But the strange noises began. I heard scratching sounds coming from the walls. It sounded like tiny claws digging at the wood. I convinced myself it was just old pipes or the wind. My stress from all the research played tricks on me. The next night, I had vivid nightmares. I saw the journal's awful drawings emerge into my dreams. I woke up gasping for air, unsure if it was real. I didn't want to admit it, but each day, the journal drew me deeper into its dark past. As I researched more about the family, I uncovered accounts of restless souls and curses that seemed endless. I felt uneasy telling friends about it. They laughed it off, but they didn't understand. The journal was twisting everything inside me. I returned to the cemetery. The air was colder than before, heavy with unease. My hands trembled as I clutched the journal. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I whipped around, and my breath caught. Nothing was there. Maybe I should have left the journal buried. Suddenly, a chill ran through me. I felt as if someone or something watched me from the shadows. I turned to leave, but it was too late. I wasn't alone anymore. My heart pounded, and I wished I could erase the find. What had I awakened? I spun around, the shadows cast by the trees dancing sinisterly in the fading light. A sound whispered through the air, soft and almost imperceptible, like the rustle of fabric.
I tried to shake the feeling that I was being watched, but dread settled in my gut. I took a hesitant step backward, then another, not taking my eyes off the areas where the shadows conspired to hide. My intention was to leave. That journal had already dragged me into too deep a mess, but my feet felt glued to the ground, as if the cemetery itself held me captive. I took a shaky breath and forced myself to move. I turned and hurried down the path, back towards the entrance. Suddenly, I heard it again. Footsteps. Soft, yet unmistakable. My heart raced. They followed me, deliberate and steady. I glanced back over my shoulder. Still nothing in sight. The unease shivered up my spine. I couldn't tell if these sounds were real or an echo of my imagination, but my instincts screamed for me to run. I burst out of the cemetery and didn't stop until I was safely inside my apartment. The moment I shut the door, I leaned against it, panting as the adrenaline rushed out of me. I needed to figure out what was happening. I could rationalize the unease. Perhaps the journal was merely a relic of a tortured past, reflecting its darkness onto me. The journal lay on my desk, inviting and menacing all at once. I hesitated, but curiosity nagged at me. I opened it again, flipping through the pages. The drawings were even more vivid now, almost as if they had changed since my last reading. They seemed to pulse with energy. Among the sketches, I found one that I had overlooked before. It depicted a dark figure standing in the woods, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I shuddered and set the journal back down. It felt wrong to linger on those pages. I had to know more about who had owned it. I grabbed my laptop and began a frantic search. I needed names, connections, something to put these pieces together and understand what had connected me to that family. After hours of digging, I stumbled upon an old newspaper article. It detailed the suspicious deaths of the family from the journal. The parents had vanished without a trace, and one sibling was found lifeless in the forest. The cause? A supposed curse, they said. It was as if the entire family had been marked by misfortune. Just as I absorbed that grim information, the scratching noise returned.
It was louder, more insistent this time, coming from behind the walls. I froze, my blood turning icy. This wasn't my imagination. I wasn't alone in my apartment anymore. I forced myself to stay still. Silence fell for a moment, but the scratching returned, accompanied by a soft, sighing sound, like someone breathing heavily. Every nerve in my body screamed to flee. I couldn't. My mind raced as I remembered the drawings, the shadowy figure and its haunting eyes. What if it was here? As I turned to look for an escape route, the lights flickered and then went dark. The temperature dropped instantly. I grabbed my phone, the screen lighting up with a weak glow. That's when I saw it. A shadow looming in the corner of my room.
It was just as the journal had depicted. I stumbled back and my heart stopped. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. What had I awakened? In that moment, I felt like the room was closing in on me. The shadow moved slightly, drawing my eyes like a moth to a flame. I couldn't blink. I couldn't breathe. It felt like my heart pounded hard enough to shatter the silence. Suddenly, the shadow shifted closer. I stumbled back, kicking over the chair. The sound echoed in the darkness, cutting through my fear for a split second. That jolted me into action. I dashed towards the front door, praying it wasn't locked. My fingers fumbled on the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. I could feel the cold air brush against my neck, sending chills down my spine. The breathing sound grew louder, more labored. Whatever was in the corner wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was real, and it wanted me. I turned to face the dark corner, my phone illuminating just enough to catch a glimpse of something red in those eyes. A low growl vibrated through the air, and I felt that grabbing sensation of fear crawl up the back of my neck. Maybe I was going crazy. A shadow in a corner? This was absurd. But the energy in the room shifted, heavy and oppressive like a storm about to break. I couldn't rationalize it away anymore. I needed to escape. With one final push, I yanked the door open just as something swiped at my back. I gasped and stumbled out into the hall, not looking back. The weight of the darkness stayed with me, wrapping around my mind as I raced down the stairs of my apartment building. I burst outside, the cool air hitting my face as I stood on the street. I took a moment to gather myself. I was still alive, but that monstrous shadow had felt too real. Shaking, I pulled my phone back out and turned on the flashlight. I needed answers. Something about that journal, the figure I saw, it all felt connected. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, breaking the silence around me. A message. I squinted at the screen. A text from an unknown number. Leave the past behind. It won't let you go. My stomach dropped. Who was this? A friend? A joke? I felt sick as realization crashed over me. This wasn't just some history. It was stalking me, clawing its way out of the shadows. I looked back at my apartment, the darkness now seeming to swallow it whole. I had to confront whatever this thing was, but I couldn't do it alone. I fished out my keys and headed for my car, needling my mind for anyone who might help. There had to be someone who knew about curses, shadows, the journal. I could find them. I had to. As I reached my car, the lights flashed on, illuminating the area, and just for a fleeting second in the periphery of the headlights, I thought I saw the dark figure emerge from the shadows behind my building. I froze, staring as it lingered for a heartbeat, checking me out, gauging my fear. Then it vanished just as quickly. I jumped inside my car and locked the doors, heart pounding. This was just the beginning. Whatever had been unleashed wasn't going to leave me alone. I had to dig deeper, and I needed to find answers before it found me again. I couldn't sit still in the car. I turned the key in the ignition and backed out of the parking spot. My mind raced, replaying the text, the shadow, the eerie growl. The streets were quiet, but my thoughts were loud. I needed to find someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of all this. I could think of one name, Clara, a distant friend from college. She had always talked about the supernatural and curses, almost like it was a hobby. Maybe she would know something. But was it even worth the risk of contacting her? Still, I couldn't ignore the gut feeling that led me to her. As I drove toward her apartment, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The night was dark, but I could have sworn I saw a flicker of movement behind me. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. Just paranoia, I told myself. I parked in front of her building and sat for a moment. Maybe I was making a mistake. What could I really say? Hey, I think I'm being haunted by a shadow? That sounded crazy, even to my own ears. But I couldn't turn back now. I stepped out of the car and hurried toward the entrance. Clara answered on the second knock. Her eyes widened as she opened the door. Hey, it's been ages. What brings you here?
"Clara, I really need your help," I blurted out, feeling the weight of my urgency. "I think something is coming for me." She frowned, stepping aside to let me in. Her apartment was cluttered with books and trinkets that hinted at her fascination with the occult. "What do you mean?" I quickly recounted the events from the night before, the shadow, the growl, the message. Clara listened intently, her eyes narrowing as I spoke. When I finished, she leaned back, contemplating. "You said there was a journal. Do you have it?" I nodded. "It's at my place. I was too scared to go back," I admitted. "Then we need it. There could be something in there that helps us understand what's going on." Her voice had shifted from curiosity to determination. "Okay, but I don't want to go back there tonight," I said, a tremor creeping into my voice. "What if it's still watching?" Clara thought for a moment, biting her lip. "We can do it together. I have some protection crystals and salt." There was something reassuring about her calmness. I nodded, and we made a plan. We'd head to my apartment first thing in the morning. Just as I began to feel a bit of relief, Clara's phone rang, breaking the silence. She answered, her expression shifting rapidly from curiosity to concern. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, her face going pale. "Who is this?" I felt a cold wave of fear. Everything shifted again. As she listened, her eyes darted over to me. "What do you mean? No one should know that."
I stood frozen, dread pooling in my stomach. A part of me understood. Whoever was on the line must have known about the journal. Then suddenly, Clara's voice cut off. The line went dead. I rushed toward her, panic rising in my chest. What did they say? Her face was ashen. "They know, and they're coming for you." That's when the air in the room thickened again, suffocating me under the weight of unspoken terror. The silence in the room felt oppressive, wrapping around us like a heavy blanket. I could barely breathe. "What do you mean they're coming for me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara shook her head, clearly processing the implications of the phone call. "I don't know, but if they know about the journal, it means they want it. Want you." Her hands trembled just slightly. I took a step back, trying to gather my thoughts. The last thing I wanted was to drag Clara into this mess. "We should call the police. They can help." Clara's expression changed. She looked almost grim. "It's not that simple. If this is what I think it is..." She hesitated, clearly wrestling with her own fears. "What is it? What are you thinking?" "The journal might be tied to something bigger, something dangerous." I felt a chill run down my spine. "We need to get to my place, now." Clara nodded quickly, grabbing her bag and motioning for me to lead the way. As we stepped outside, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The streetlights flickered above us, casting eerie shadows that danced along the pavement. The drive back felt longer than it should have. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something, or someone, behind us. Clara seemed on edge as well, her fingers clenched tightly, white-knuckled around her bag strap. When we reached my apartment, I hesitated at the door. "What if it's here?" I asked, my heart racing again. "We'll be quick," she assured me, but I could see the worry etched in her features. We stepped inside, and I was immediately hit by a wave of unease. The familiar layout felt foreign and menacing now. The journal sat innocently on the table, but I knew it brought a darkness with it. Clara eyed it cautiously. "Let's keep the lights on." I flicked the switch, flooding the room with light. It banished some of the shadows, but I still felt a sense of impending doom. Clara moved to the table, rummaging through her bag for the crystals and salt. As she prepared, I approached the journal. It lay there, waiting. My fingers hovered over it, hesitant. What exactly should we look for? Clara glanced up, her expression serious. "Any names or symbols that stand out, anything that feels wrong." I nodded, forcing myself to open the journal. The pages were weathered, filled with clawed handwriting that seemed to shift and change as I read. Names blurred together, but one caught my eye, a name I recognized. "Clara, look at this," I said, pointing to a passage. "It talks about a watcher."
"Do you think that's what is after me?" Before she could respond, a loud crash resonated from the back room. Clara jumped, and I felt my heart drop. "What was that?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice tight with fear. We exchanged horrified glances. Then I heard it. A low growl, similar to the one from last night, reverberated through the walls. My breath quickened. "It's here." "Get the crystals," Clara shouted, her eyes wild. I scrambled to grab them while the growling intensified, creeping closer. As I turned, I noticed a shadow pooling in the corner of the room. It wasn't just a trick of the light. It had a shape to it, a figure forming. I froze. That's when I saw it clearly. "Clara!" I screamed, but my voice was lost in the terror that rose around us like a tidal wave. The shadow twisted and turned, growing limbs and features that defied comprehension. My legs felt rooted to the ground, unwilling to move as instinct screamed at me to flee. "Clara, get back!" I shouted, but my voice was muffled by fear.
She clutched the salt with shaking hands, ready in herself but clearly unsure of what to do next. The figure in the corner lunged forward, the growl morphing into a guttural snarl that echoed off the walls. I instinctively stepped back, nearly tripping over my own feet. Without thinking, Clara threw a handful of salt at the burgeoning figure. It sputtered as if struck and began to retreat slightly, but I could see it reforming. "It can't just take form like that," she yelled, determination flickering in her eyes. "We need to take the journal. It's the key." The journal felt impossibly heavy in my hands, a weight that tied me to the dark entity looming before us. "What if it wants the journal?" I cried out, glancing back at Clara, whose expression had turned resolute. "Then we use it against it," she replied defiantly. "Find a passage, anything." I hesitated, but I opened the journal again, frantically flipping through pages. Words seemed to swim before me, taunting my panic. Then I found a sketch of a glyph accompanied by some phrases. "Here," I pointed excitedly. "This might be a protection spell." The shadow surged forward once more, and Clara prepared to throw more salt. I spoke the words from the journal, my voice trembling but steadying as I felt the power build within me. "By light and shadows intertwined, I bind you, creature, to your realm." The figure hesitated, a look of confusion passing over its face before a terrifying rage enveloped it. I pressed on, trying to recall every word of the spell I'd read. With each syllable, the air around us thickened, pushing against me like an unseen force. The shadow writhed, flickering as if the light was dimming. "Keep going," Clara urged, her eyes darting nervously to the darkening shape. But doubt crept in. What if this only made it angrier? "I can't. Clara, I don't think this is working. Just trust it,"
she yelled, flinging more crystals at the figure, creating a temporary barrier between it and us. Then everything went silent. The sinister growl faded, and with it, the shadow flickered once more. My heart raced as I hit the final note of the chant. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the journal, engulfing the figure entirely. I shielded my eyes, hearing a piercing scream that sent chills down my spine. When the light subsided, the figure was gone. Clara and I stood panting, our eyes locked in disbelief. We had banished it, for now. Breathing heavily, I looked back at the journal. But what if it comes back? "I don't know," Clara admitted, her brow furrowed. "But there's something more we need to uncover about the Watcher. Something that ties it to us." I grabbed the journal tightly, a new wave of determination surging within me. Then, from the shadows, I noticed another passage I hadn't seen before. My gut twisted. This was just the beginning. Something deeper and darker was waiting to be revealed. The next morning, the sun felt unusually harsh against my skin. I woke up restless, my mind circling back to the dark encounter. Despite what Clara and I had done, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only scratched the surface. I could see the journal lying on my desk, its presence heavy in the room, like a secret waiting to unfold. Clara texted me, asking if I wanted to meet up. "We need to talk," it said. I knew it wasn't just the shadow that had us in its grip. It felt like something deeper was at play. I arrived at the cafe where we agreed to meet, the familiar smell of coffee mixing with the tension in the air. Clara was already seated, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. "I found something," she said as soon as I sat down. "What is it?" I asked, trying to mask my anxiety. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was blurry, but identifiable, an old newspaper clipping about a series of mysterious disappearances around the cemetery close to our town. "Look at the dates," she said, pointing at the print. They lined up with the initial entries from the journal. "Are you serious?" I gasped. "These people were taken by the Watcher?" "I don't know," she replied, pushing her hair back. "But they all had links to the same family, one that's mentioned in the journal." I felt a cold wave wash over me. The implications were staggering. "We have to dig deeper," I said, my mind racing. "We can't let this go without answers." As we sat there, a man entered the cafe, his presence oddly unsettling. He wore a long coat despite the warmth outside and had an unreadable expression. I glanced over my shoulder, feeling as though he was watching us. Clara noticed too. "Do you know him?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "I've never seen him before, but he feels off." Just then, he turned his gaze toward us, locking eyes with Clara. She stiffened. "What does he want?" I whispered, almost to myself.
But before I could say more, the man stepped back outside. "He's gone," Clara said, exhaling in relief. "Maybe we should get out of here too. I don't like how he looked at us." We both gathered our things, but as we stood to leave, I noticed the man's shadow, long and dark, lingering against the wall of the cafe, even though he had stepped away. I felt my heart skip. The Watcher wasn't contained to one form. Once outside, we hurried down the street. "What if he knows about the journal?" Clara whispered. The thought terrified me. What if he was connected to the shadow we had banned?
What if he was coming for us? I tried to shake it off, but the dread was palpable. We need to find that family, I urged. They might have more answers about all this. Clara nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind us. When I turned to look, the man was back, closer this time, his figure emerging from the corner. I sensed danger rising. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Clara's hand. We took off down the street, the pounding of our hearts echoing the urgency of our escape. But as we ran, I had the sinking feeling this wasn't over. The journal's secrets were stirring, and the Watcher had us in its sights again. As we sprinted away from the cafe, the world around us blurred into a whirlwind of anxiety and fear. I didn't dare look back. The memory of that man's cold stare burned into my mind. I could barely keep up with Clara as she pulled me toward the park. We ducked behind a row of trees, gasping for breath. "What do we do now?" Clara asked, her eyes wide and frantic. "We need to figure out who that man is," I replied, still trying to catch my breath. "He's connected to all of this somehow." Clara nodded slowly. "Maybe we can go to the library. There might be records on the family from the journal." I agreed, though the thought of returning to the place felt suffocating. After a few minutes, we composed ourselves and made our way toward the library. The streets felt emptier somehow, as if they too sensed the unease that hung over us. When we arrived, the large wooden doors creaked as I pushed them open. The musty smell of old books enveloped us. I navigated Clara through the rows until we found the local history section. Flipping through books and dusty binders, we searched for any mention of the family from the journal. "How do we even know where to start?" she asked, her voice quiet. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. "There has to be something here," I murmured, uncertain. Just then, Clara's finger paused over a page. "Look at this!" Her excitement was palpable, but a whisper of dread shadowed it. She pointed to a name, the Smiths, the very family mentioned in the journal. Beneath it, there was a list of their living relatives, but next to their names were dates of death. My skin went cold, almost all marked within weeks of the disappearances from the newspaper article. "What does this mean?" Clara's voice trembled.
Maybe, I started, my heart racing. Maybe they're all connected. The Watcher, the disappearing people, and this family. The silence that followed hung heavily as we processed what that could entail. I reached for the journal in my bag, desperate for more answers. But then I realized I had left it at home. "Let's get it," Clara urged, sensing my panic. We had to return soon. As we stepped out of the library, I still felt that cold presence lingering in the background. Instead of heading straight home, I glanced around, uneasy. Clara noticed. "What's wrong?" "That man," I said, looking around. "What if he's on to us?" Suddenly, a rustling noise came from the trees nearby. Clara tensed. "Did you hear that?" Before I could respond, a shadow moved quickly between the trees. My heart stopped. I didn't wait to see who or what it was. "Run!" I yelled again, urgency taking over. This time we bolted toward home without stopping, dodging pedestrians and ignoring the looks we received. The weight of our discovery settled heavily on my shoulders, and with every step the sense of danger grew. When we finally reached my front door, I fumbled with my keys. Come on, I said, my voice rising in panic. Just as the door swung open, I caught sight of the man standing at the edge of the road, his coat billowing slightly in the breeze. I froze, remembering the journal. The weight of its secrets pressed down even harder now. I was sure of one thing. Whatever dark forces we had unwittingly awakened were no longer content hiding in shadows. "Let's go inside," Clara urged, pulling me back from my daze. As we stepped inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. That's when I saw it. The journal was lying on the floor where I dropped it during our last frantic escape. I picked it up, my hands trembling. As I flipped through the pages, something fell out, an envelope with a familiar seal. "What's this?" Clara asked, her curiosity piqued. I opened it, revealing an old photograph of the Smith family, but behind them, blurred in the background, was a figure cloaked in shadow. Heart pounding, I realized that the Watcher had been watching all along. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I stared at the figure in the photograph. The blurred shape seemed unnervingly close, as if it had been lurking near the Smith family, waiting. "This is him," I whispered, feeling the weight of the moment settle over us like a heavy blanket. Clara leaned in, squinting at the image. "What do you think he wanted? Why is he always watching?" "I don't know," I said, my voice uneasy, "but we need to find out." I placed the photograph carefully on the table, my mind racing. That man at the cafe and this shadowy figure, they had to be connected. Clara paced the room, her hands twisting nervously. "Do you think he knows we have the journal? What if he tries to come after us?" I tried to push down my growing panic. "We can't think like that. We need to focus."
The journal. It has to hold more clues. We sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the journal. I flipped through the pages again, looking for anything that might help us understand the Smith family and the Watcher. My eyes skimmed over passages about family history, old letters, and faded sketches. "Wait," I said suddenly, pausing on a page that described a family gathering at the Smith house. "This mentions a landmark, the old cemetery. It's close to where they used to live." Excitement flickered in my chest. What if there's something there? Clara frowned. "You mean like going to the cemetery? Now?" "Why not? It could be crucial. If the Watcher is connected to the Smiths, then maybe we can find out more about him there." She gazed out the window uneasily, then back at me. "All right, but let's be careful. It feels too dangerous out there." As dusk settled in, we made our way to the cemetery. The shadows elongated across the path, and the wind rustled through the graves, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I could feel Clara's tension beside me, her hand gripping my arm. We arrived at the entrance. The metal gate creaked ominously as I pulled it open. As soon as we stepped inside, a freezing chill surrounded us, and the twilight made the tombstones loom larger and more imposing. "This is creepy," Clara muttered, glancing over her shoulder. "Let's try to find the Smith plot," I urged, squinting at the faded map on the sign. We walked deeper into the rows of graves, each one whispering forgotten stories. It wasn't long before we found it. The Smith family plot was simple but worn, a few weathered stones and a larger monument with the family name. I felt a strange pull to it. There has to be something here. As I knelt to examine the stones, Clara's breath caught. "Look," she pointed to a particular grave. The name was partially obscured by moss, but I could make it out. Ella Smith, the last known relative. I reached for a small stone, brushed off the moss, and saw a date etched in. It matched the date next to Ella's name from the library. She died just days before the first disappearance, I realized aloud. Before I could think, Clara pulled me back, eyes wide with fear. "We aren't alone." I turned quickly and froze. A figure stood a few yards away, his dark coat blending into the night. "The Watcher!" My breath hitched as he stepped forward. "Who are you?" I shouted, but my voice trembled. He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the Smith grave, and I felt my heart pound. "Why are you here?" He finally spoke, his voice low. The dread settled as I realized we'd unraveled something far more dangerous than we'd anticipated. Panic surged through me as I stood face to face with the Watcher. His shadowy figure loomed, the icy air thickening around us. Clara's grip tightened on my arm, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The cemetery felt alive, the stones whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. "Why are you here?"
He repeated, his voice like gravel, sending chills crawling down my spine. We're investigating," I stammered, the weight of my words feeling feeble. "The Smith family, the journal, we just want to understand." His eyes glimmered, two dark orbs that seemed to absorb the light around us. "Understanding brings danger. You should not dig into what was buried." The rest of the cemetery felt distant, the air pulsing with tension. I glanced back to the Smith grave, the stone so innocuous yet heavy with history. What was the connection between this man and the family? "I have to know," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "What happened to them? To you? What do you want?" The Watcher tilted his head, an eerie twist of curiosity mixed with menace. "What I want is not for you to concern yourselves with, but what you seek can unearth far darker things than you can comprehend." Clara stepped forward slightly, emboldened by my presence. "If you're tied to the Smiths, then you must know about the disappearances. Is this about the journal? Is that what you're after?" He took a slow step towards us, and I felt my heart race. For a moment I thought he might attack, but then, curiously, he paused. "The journal binds what was lost. It draws forth the echoes of those who sought refuge," he said, his voice a whisper. "But those echoes may awaken further grief, unfolding pain." Tension crackled as I exchanged glances with Clara. What could he mean by that? "Have you seen the journal? Tell us how to stop this," I blurted out, the urgency igniting my frustration. His gaze shifted to the gravestones around us, his expression inscrutable. "It cannot be stopped. Not yet. The path it will take is spiraled with curses, with blood. You willingly hold the chain that connects you to the past." Without thinking, I took a step forward, desperation fueling my courage. "Then help us break it. Whatever binds you, you don't have to be trapped by it." For the briefest moment, the air thickened with an emotion that felt like sorrow. His figure wavered, an uncertain flicker, before the darkness returned. "To shatter the chain, you must face what is entwined within." "What do you mean?" Clara asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Your stories are entwined. Find the truth within the pages. Find the echoes." A sudden gust of wind swept through the cemetery, rustling leaves and echoing the shadows. The Watcher stepped back, his figure growing dimmer. "Time is a spiral, and the past is patient. It shall call when you least expect it." With that, he melded into the gloom,
leaving a frigid void where he had stood. Clara and I were left in an unnerving silence, the weight of his words hanging thickly in the air. "What does that mean?" Clara finally broke the spell, looking toward the grave, then back to me. "What echoes?" I swallowed hard, forcing my racing heart to calm. I think it means we need to look deeper into the journal, find what we missed."
The connection with the Smiths. Yes, but that doesn't tell us how to stop whatever hangs over us, she said, glancing around nervously. That man, we need to keep moving before he decides to come back. I nodded, though the events churned in my mind, begging for clarity. What had the Watcher meant by echoes, and what ties still lingered between us and that dark history? As we turned to leave the cemetery, the shadows seemed to stretch behind us, taunting our doubts. I could hear the faint whispering of the wind, echoing the uncertainty written within the journal. We stepped beyond the gate, and I glanced back one last time, my heart heavy with questions. Whatever we had stirred, it persisted beyond the boundaries of understanding, dark and elusive. I moved to get into the car, the night pressing upon us with growing unease. Clara climbed into the passenger seat, her eyes darting to the surrounding darkness. "We can't go back to the apartment," she said quietly. "We need somewhere else." "Where?" I asked, realizing as I spoke that the weight of the journal loomed over us. "I don't know. Somewhere safe," Clara replied, gripping her bag tightly as if it could ground her to reality. "But let's find a way to understand what we've woken up. Together." As I drove into the stillness of the night, I could feel the Watcher's presence lingering, gnawing at my mind like a fading echo. We had entered a labyrinth of shadows without a clear end, each twist inviting more questions than answers. I had escaped the immediate danger, but I knew the past was far from laid to rest. If anything, it was just beginning its haunting melody, the echoes still resonating in the dark.